Good day, class. In this module, we will examine the complexities of policymaking and implementation in response to the changing environment at the national and international levels. You will also deliberate how crucial political and educational system and national pride and interest are in shaping our youth's minds to become a catalyst for environmental reforms towards transitioning to sustainable development. So now, what do we mean by environmental policy? No? So environmental policy includes policies, practices, and laws designed to protect human health and well-being, natural resources, and environmentally quality. Theoretically, in a democratic system, these policies are established through negotiation and compromise. Open debate allows all voices to be heard, and policy decisions promote collective well-being. Elected representatives defend policies they think will benefit their constituents. Now, um, power and influence inevitably control much of our policy making. Economic interest groups, industry associations, and powerful individuals often have disproportionate access to lawmakers. Another thing is that public interest groups work to gain similar access by developing broad support, by bringing citizens together to write letters or meet with legislators, and by drawing attention to a cause or an issue in hopes that voters contact their legislators. So, we often describe the policy development as a cycle, no? Shown in this figure, a problem is identified first, usually by concerned groups of citizens or interest groups. Plans to resolve the problem are then developed through discussion, and new rules are proposed. Next, popular support is built to gather votes for the new rule. Now, if the rule is agreed to, then it is implemented. Evaluation then leads to identification of flaws in the rule, and the cycle starts again. Building support is central to policy development. Proponents open to media campaigns, public education, and personal lobbying of decision makers. Now, let us proceed to environmental laws in the Philippines. So there are 6 laws included in our discussion. The cornerstone of Philippine environmental policy is the Presidential Decree number 1152 series of 1977, or the Philippine Environment Code, where it serves as a framework in the launching of a comprehensive program of environmental protection and management. First is that this includes the achievement and maintenance of such levels of air quality as to protect public health. Also, the prevention of the greatest extent practicable injury and or damage to plant and animal life and property, and to promote the social and economic development of the country. Next is the Republic Act 8749, or the Clean Air Act of 1999. This law particularly regulates air emissions, which aims to achieve and maintain clean air that meets the National Air Quality Guideline value for criteria pollutants throughout the Philippines, while minimizing the possible associated impact to the economy. Another Philippine environmental law is the Republic Act 9275, or also known as the Clean Water Act of 2004, which generally protects our surface water. So this particularly aims to protect the country's water bodies from pollution from land-based sources such as industries and commercial establishments, agriculture, and household activities. It also instills comprehensive and integrated strategy to prevent and minimize pollution through a multi-sectoral and participatory approach which involves all the stakeholders. And then we also have the environmental law, which is the Republic Act 9147 or the Wildlife Resources Conservation and Protection Act of 2001, which generally aims to protect wildlife. So this law was particularly implemented to conserve and protect the country's wildlife resources and their habitats, appropriating funds not therefore and for other purposes to promote ecological balance and enhance biological diversity. Furthermore, it focuses on the regulation of the collection and trade of wildlife. It also strives to pursue, with due to regard the national interest, the Philippine commitment to international conventions, protection of wildlife and their habitats, and to initiate or support scientific studies on the conservation of biological diversity. Now, we have Republic Act 6969, no? Or also known as the Toxic Substances, Hazardous and Nuclear Waste Control Act of 1990, which addresses hazardous sites. This law aims to regulate, restrict or prohibit the importation, manufacture, processing, sale, distribution, use, and disposal of chemical substances and mixtures which present unreasonable risk to human health. It likewise prohibits the entry, even in transit, of hazardous and nuclear waste and their disposal into the Philippine territorial limits for whatever purpose, and to provide advancement and facilitate research and studies on toxic chemicals. Lastly, we have the Presidential Decree number 1586 or the Environmental Impact Statement of 1978, the Environmental Impact Assessment of 1978, which seeks to balance between socio-economic development and environmental protection. So the Environmental Impact Assessment system was formally established in 1978 with the enactment of Presidential Decree number 1586 to facilitate the attainment and maintenance of a rational and orderly balance between socio-economic development and environmental protection. EIA is a planning and management tool that will help government decision makers, the proponents and the affected community address the negative consequences or risks on the environment. So the process assures that the implementation of environment-friendly project as well. So aside from the major Philippine environmental laws, we have major international policies as well. So now these are some of the important international treaties. First is the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands of International Importance, especially as waterfall habitat heritage treaty, which is a convention concerning the protection of the world cultural and natural heritage. We also have the CITES, which is a convention on international trade and endangered species of wild fauna and flora. Another one is the CMS Treaty or the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals. Next is the Ozone Treaty, which is Vienna Convention for the Protection of Ozone Layer and Montreal Protocol on Substances that Deplete the Ozone Layer. Now we have the Basel Treaty, which is Basel Convention on the Transboundary Movements of Hazardous Waste and their Disposal. CBD, particular means the Convention on Biological Diversity, and UNFCCC, means United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And lastly, the CCD Treaty or the United Nations Convention to combat desertification in those countries experiencing serious drought and desertification, particularly in Africa. I think no, you're all familiar with United Nations, right? So perhaps you have heard it na in the television or maybe you've read it on the internet. Now, United Nations is an intergovernmental organization tasked with maintaining the international peace and security, developing friendly relations among nations, achieving international cooperation, and being a center of harmonizing the actions of nations. It was founded on October 24, 1945 after the World War II. Its predecessor, no, the League of Nations, was created by the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 and disbanded in 1946. Then, during the 1992 Earth Summit, more than 200 countries participated in the conference, including the Philippines, wherein Estrada was the president back then. The summit particularly addressed the issues concerning environmental protection and socioeconomic development and sustainable development was formed then. No? So now sustainable development aims to meet the needs of people today without compromising resources and environmental systems for future generations. Okay? According to the former World Health Organization Director Dro Harlem Brundtland, this idea became widely publicized after the 1992 Earth Summit, a United Nations meeting held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So the United Nations Millennium Development Goals are 8 goals that all 191 United Nations member states have agreed to try to achieve by the year 2015. The United Nations Millennium Declaration, signed in September 2000, commits world leaders to combat poverty, hunger, disease, illiteracy, environmental degradation, and discrimination against women. So the MDGs are derived from this declaration and all have specific targets and indicators. Now, on January 1, 2016, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by world leaders in September 2015 at an historic UN summit, now officially came into the force. Over the next 15 years, with these new goals that universally apply to all, countries will mobilize efforts to end all forms of poverty, fight inequalities, and tackle further to end all forms of poverty. So, the SDG, also known as Global Goals, build on the success of the Millennium Development Goals and aim to go further, to end of all forms of poverty. So the new goals are unique in that they call for action by all countries, poor, rich, and middle income, to promote prosperity while protecting the planet. They recognize that ending poverty must go hand in hand with strategies that build economic growth and addresses a range of social needs, including education, health, social protection, and job opportunities, while tackling climate change and environmental protection. While the SDGs are not legally binding, governments are expected to take ownership and establish national framework for the achievement of the 17 goals. Countries now have the primary responsibility for follow-up and review of the progress made in implementing the goals, which will require quality, accessible, and timely data collection. Region follow-up and review will be based on national-level analysis and contribute to follow-up and review at the global level. Now, there are 3 pillars of sustainable development. The concept of sustainable development can be interpreted in many different ways. But at its core is an approach to development that looks to balance different and open competing needs against an awareness of the environmental, social, economic limitations we face as society. Now, here are some of the points in order to attain sustainable development. First is to combat poverty because poverty particularly reduces the access to healthcare, education, and other essential components of development. Second, reducing resource consumption is a global consideration, but wealthy regions are responsible for most of the world's consumption. So, for example, the United States and Europe have less than 15% of the world's population. But these regions consume about half of the world's metals, food, energy, and other resources. No? So third is that population growth leads to ever greater resource demands because all people need some resources. Better family planning should be done. Ensuring that all children are wanted, is a matter of justice, a resource supply, and economic and social stability for states as well as for families. Fourth is that healthcare, especially for children and mothers, is essential for productive life. Underdeveloped areas, such as that shown above, can lead to disease, accidents, respiratory and digestive impairments, and other conditions. Without health, economic security is at risk, and poverty can persist through generations. Now, fifth point is that sustainable cities are key because over half of humanity now lives in cities. Sustainable development involves ensuring that cities are healthy places not to live and they cause minimal environmental impact. So, in addition, environmental policy needs to guide decision making in local and national governments to ensure the environmental quality is protected before it gets damaged, and to set agreed upon rules for resource use. Seventh point is the protection of atmosphere is essential for minimizing the rate of climate change and for reducing impacts of air pollution on people, plants, and infrastructure. The next is combating desertification and drought through better management of water resources can save farms, ecosystems, and lives. Often, removal of vegetation and soil loss make drought worse, and a few bad rainfall years can convert a landscape to desert-like condition. Ninth is the combating deforestation and protecting biodiversity should go together because much of the world's biodiversity is in the forest in general. Lastly, agriculture and rural development help reduce populations in urban slums, and this affect the lives of the nearly half of humanity who don't live in cities in an improved way. So, environmental science is essential to sustainable development because it helps us understand how environmental systems work, how they are degraded, and what factors can help restore them. At the end, studying environmental science can prepare you to aid human development and environmental quality, both at home and abroad, through better policies, resource protection, and learning. Okay? So is all for today's topic. Thank you for listening.